Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to the Garn Report series recap edition since the Celtics beat the Heat in Game 5, 118-84. Win this series 4-1. Many predicted a sweep. Few were predicted 5 games. They ended up being right. John and I
You had 5?
had 6.
I had 6.
Didn't work.
Lead with who got it right.
Wow.
Lead with who got it right, Bobby, not who got it wrong.
Josue,
Pavon.
You guys for the
called
few.
it in 5.
Well, congrats.
I guess.
What did they prove in this series, Josue? Interesting discussion after this game being that they didn't view this series as any sort of revenge or statement or response to their losses in the past against this team. It was just business, playing who was in front of them. Jalen said that. Joe said you can't compare it to past years. Even Jason Tatum, who said he wanted to play the Heat, alluded to it being more of like an alertness, a wake-up call, rather than them trying to get back at this team. And that makes sense, right? Because this wasn't the Heat that they played in this series. So what does it mean, if anything?
I mean, I think we learned just how much of a difference it makes when you take every play for what it's worth and the intensity and the aggressiveness, all the stuff that we talked about essentially after Game 2. I just feel like the Celtics never reverted back to those old habits that we saw in Game 1 or in Game 2 rather. And even in Game 1, you never got the sense of, wow, they really dominated that team, you know? And then they went into Game 2, they learned their lesson, so to speak, and they haven't gone back to that since. I mean, look, it's easy to pinpoint the flaws of this Miami Heat team because they're so short-handed. But as Eric Spoelstra said, you got to also give props to the Celtics where it's due. Not only did they dominate throughout the course of the regular season, but they were able to sort of flip that switch and just never go back. And it was other guys. It wasn't just Tatum and Brown. It was Derek White, who's on this tear these last couple of games. You know, it was guys buckling down defensively. Sure, you lose Kristaps Porzingis, but the way these guys responded, you didn't see a big difference or you didn't feel a sense of vulnerability throughout that second half of Game 4 and throughout the entire 48 minutes of Game 5.
No, Dalzell here from Celtics Blog. What was your biggest takeaway from the series, or what did it mean for the Celtics, you think?
Yeah, I thought, honestly, I'm in the camp that this was a really impressive series. Like, Game 2 was disappointing. The Heat also got incredibly hot. But the way they responded these last 3 games, it was the Celtics team that we saw all season. Every time there was any sort of bump in the road, they came out a 9-game win streak, And not only did they win these 3 games, but they won them in really resounding fashion on both ends of the floor, playing really well. I thought tonight's game was super impressive. Game 5 at home. I think I saw somewhere they hadn't won Game 5 at home in years. And this is the exact kind of game that this could have gone down to the wire. They dominated from the beginning. And contributions across the board. I mean, from 3 guys that really don't have any playoff experience. Luke Cornett, Sam Hauser, Peyton Pritchard. I think in this round they showed that they're here to play in the postseason and that they're ready to go. And Luke actually handled Bam amazingly tonight, and that was that was good to see as well. So there were a lot of little encouraging signs. I see you're happy to talk. Yeah, I brought it for you. So, but generally speaking, I thought just the defensive intensity and just the attention to detail. Joe talked about it so many times throughout the series and so many times tonight. But we wanted to see Miami in the first round because Miami was going to force you to pay attention to the details, regardless of Jimmy Butler, regardless of Rozier. It doesn't matter. Those guys are going to be locked in. And so I think the Celtics had to step up, and they did so accordingly.
Yeah, and it was a struggle at times offensively in this series. Tonight, great. First game without Porzingis, especially impressive with Derek White going off. Jason Tatum finding his footing as well. And the Celtics just shooting great, but also moving the ball. 3-4 pass possessions in the first half, all set up amazing. Offensive runs for the team. I think like a 26-7 run or something put them up by the 20 and then 30-point lead and as many as 37 in this game. So they ran it up tonight. And Jason Tatum, after the game, had some thoughts about criticism of the Celtics' toughness in this series. And that was what he pointed to, as well as Joe Mazzulla, the physicality and the toughness the Celtics showed that they can play with in this series, even when the offense wasn't there.
Yeah, I think just being honest with ourselves, right? What are teams, what's their message, what's their game plan to beat us, and it's to, pick up the pace, the pressure, be more physical, crash the glass, do all the intangible things. So if we know that, why don't we flip the script and be the tougher team? Why don't we crash the glass more? We pick up the pressure on defense, while still, being the talented team that we are. It'd be tough to beat us.
So he went on to say, you can't just out-tough the Celtics, and he doesn't even really know what that means. Just because you're the louder team or the more audacious team on the court, that makes you the tougher team. He thinks the Celtics themselves can play with that level of toughness, and that came along as the series went on. I feel like the offensive rebounding, the defense they played in games 3, 4, and 5 after that awful game 2. So I think they learned something about their toughness, their ability to play physical. We said it throughout the series. Even when the shooting's not there, even when the offense doesn't come easily to them, can you still be that team that defends hard, that grinds the other team to a halt, and wins that way? And I feel like that was a big story over the last 3 games of this series.
Well, because they responded to it, right? I mean, I just feel like, yeah, the Miami Heat were shorthanded, but that never stopped their approach to defense, right? Whether it was the aggressive plays, the
Heat tried to challenge some of those areas.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's what they do, especially when they're shorthanded, and especially when they embody that Heat culture, which some people may view as a bit dirty or not fair, so to speak. But I feel like at the end of the day, it's about getting you out of your game, getting you out of your comfort zone. That's what they try to do over and over again. That's a big part of what played to last year's team. And this is a completely different team, but you saw shades of that in those first 2 games, and to see the Celtics split those games and go out to Miami, but they took care of business out there. And I think that's the part that stood out the most of this series, to win those games on the road, even though there were some of those plays, even though they weren't getting their calls. You saw that frustration from Tatum and other guys looking at the officials, but they went back to their focused game plan, and I think that's the part that Jason Tatum is speaking to, like, yeah, maybe our old team, or the way we used to be, that you would have got us with those tricks, and we're talking about a game 6 or maybe in the game 7 between these 2 teams. But in this game, you just saw right from the jump that where their head was at. And that was something else that Eric Spoelstra talked about after game 5. Like, look, people can talk about us not having our guys, but give those guys credit. They didn't let up once, and that stood throughout the entire game in game 5.
Getting this done in 5 games too, I think, speaks to their toughness too.
Definitely,
another interesting thing Tatum said was that they relaxed against the Hawks last year, and what we talked about going into this series, the alertness, the awareness of what the Heat can do. They took that seriously, and it took a little bit of a wake-up call in game 2 to get there fully. But by the end of the series, I think all the tactics the Heat tried, the frustration with calls, the Bam incident last game, none of that affected them. And I think that, more than anything, points to the toughness they developed through the series, even over the whole year.
Yeah, and I honestly loved that quote by Tatum. I think that he speaks to a broader trend around the NBA. It's like Pat Bev and Draymond Green are considered tough, but there's a lot of different ways to be tough. And if you look at throughout history, like Tim Duncan's tough, right? He may not be getting in your face, but those have been some of the most successful players in history. And I think he was speaking to it because he's been criticized for not being the guy that's loud and yelling at people. But he's obviously been one of the most effective players of this generation, really, of these last few years. We're talking about how he's most postseason points, most games won in the postseason since he joined the league. But I think this Celtics team showed that they're defensively locked in. And I also did see a downtick in referee complaint. Porzingis mentioned that at shoot around in Atlanta, that he wanted to be one of those guys where he watches players that don't complain. He wants to be like those guys. I think that you saw a little bit of that, of them not getting rattled by hard fouls. Like first play of the game, Bam toppled Al
that was
over.
The message,
that was like, that was like Kobe knocking Pau over. That was it was really like a intentional thing. You knew he was coming into it doing that, and there was no reaction. They didn't fall into those things. Whereas last year in the Eastern Conference Finals, so many times you saw them get away from like what their game plan was because they fell into those antics, and so that was super encouraging to see.
Especially a play like that, like last year's team, that
was wild.
Don't you dare touch Al like that. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's the kind of play that could just easily have knocked them off their focus, but not this year's team. Yeah, it's a good point.
Great series. I love the way they handled it. You had some frustrating moments. The offense needs to get better. That was a message tonight, too, that they can get better off this series. They need to get better going into what's going to be another defensive grind of a series, whether it's the Magic or the Cavs. We'll get into that. We have plenty of time to do it, with there potentially being 5 days off before that series begins for the Celtics. Magic and Cavs play on Friday in their game 6, with Cleveland up 3-2 in that series. Celtics will play the winner either on Sunday or Tuesday. So stay tuned for coverage and previews of those series. More podcasts to come, more Garden reports to come.
Cedric Maxwell podcast, brand new one coming up.
And of course, all of it brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS for 100% deposit match up to $100. Josue and I combined to get a successful pick.
Yeah, we did.
Tatum going less.
Crushed it.
Bam going more. It became a little scary, dicey with Bam in the second half when he slowed down. He started 0 for 6 after halftime, but we got it. You can go and just pick 2 players or more, and you're off to the races on our official daily fantasy sports partner. And show some love as well to our new awesome partner, Game time can get you into the game right up to or even after that opening tip-off tonight. You could have gone in here for $103 on Game Time. When you use our code CLNS, you're going to get a $20 discount on your first purchase. Of course, terms apply. Check out the Game Time app and download it to show some love to CLNS Media, the Garden Report, and get yourself into Game 1 of this next series. Check it out. Right up to Game Time. See what the deals are over there. And, of course, get $20 off your first purchase with that code CLNS. She is Noah Dalzell. Check out her work over on Celtics blog. Josue's on Chris Stapp Watch. Seeing him again tonight.
Yeah, check
Where
it
do you
out,
keep
man.
finding him?
New update. I mean, listen, people need to know, guys, you know? So, yeah, check out my newest update on Kristaps Porzingis. And, of course, another brand new episode of Cedric Maxwell Podcast with a very special guest, former Celtic. I'll just leave it at that. Stay tuned.
All right. Subscribe, Celtics All Access. Get all the reaction from the players tonight on CLNS Media. And we'll see you back here again soon at the Garden on the Garden Report. Talk to you soon. Yeah, then.